I do love a brand, has to be said. I mean, I like to build.
Make sure you tag us if you put us on YouTube.
Of course. I don't know how to do that, but I hope Fiona does, but I don't, but it's fine. Cool. Yeah, did I let them in? I did not let them in, unfortunately. Admittal, and we are all good. Hi everyone, thanks so much for your patience. We had a bit of a technical nightmare, so thanks for sort of bearing with us until now, and yeah, thanks so much for being here. And my name is Charlotte, and I'm the Training and Opportunities Officer for the SPA, and this is our newsletter, or well, our panel all about newsletters and kind of starting up. And we're joined by Jenny Stallard, Rachael Davies, and Isabella Silvers, who will be talking about their own experiences. So just to kind of kick it off, Jenny, just tell us all about your newsletter.
Hi everyone, my newsletter is Freelance Feels, which is part of a platform that I created back in June 2019, which was kind of a response to my own challenges and ups and downs as a freelance writer. I now have retrained as well as a coach, so I now offer coaching through Freelance Feels, but the newsletter is monthly, and each month is on a theme. So sometimes it's to do with like literally the month, like Freelance Fools was one April, or maybe I think I did May the Freelance Fourth be with you force last year. So it's always monthly on a particular theme, and it kind of just looks at how I'm feeling about freelancing and ponders on a bit of a theme with some advice. The newsletter now has 1,058 subscribers, which is since January 2020. So I'm quite pleased with that. So yeah, Freelance Feels, it's on Substack, which I think the other two ladies work on as well. So if anyone's already wondering about which platform, I think we're all Substack fans. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And I do love a bit of Substack. And Rachael, tell us about Failing Publicly.
Yeah, so my newsletter is called Failing Publicly. I started it in December 2020. It's actually like the third or the fourth newsletter that I've started, but it's the only one that I've really like hooked onto a topic for long enough to keep it going consistently. And it's all about failing as a freelancer, and the kind of mess ups that come with freelancing, being honest about them. It features a range of like my own stories, kind of general themes, and then stories from readers as well. We've gained we just broke 250 subscribers just recently, actually. So I'm pretty happy with that since December. And yeah, onwards and upwards, I guess. And I also just started my own newsletter awards, which is also quite fun. Should be good soon.
So I guess Jenny and Izzy will have to get their applications in early for that.
I was going to say, I need those details.
Yeah, I was going to say, put a link in the chat.
Yeah, and don't worry, Marino, I'll try and find the links now, actually, and we'll also link them in the end. And yeah, and Izzy, tell us about your newsletter.
Yeah, so my newsletter is called Mixed Messages, and it's not about journalism. It is about mixed identity, and by that I mean mixed race, but I'm not sure if I like the term mixed race. So I am half Indian, half English, but already, you know, when I talk about being mixed, there's so much nuance within my identity, because my grandparents are actually East African Indian, and my mum was born in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. My granny was born in Mombasa in Kenya. So if I say I'm half Indian, I think you get an impression of me that's not what my life is like. So I've been thinking a lot about race, and, you know, identity and intersectionality is something that I've always included in everything I do in my work as a journalist. And Mixed Messages is a weekly newsletter released on a Monday morning, I try, that interviews a different person from lots of different industries about what they feel about being mixed. And I aim to speak to a range of different people. So I've interviewed Amanda from Selling Sunset, highlight. Have interviewed Farah Storr, who's the editor-in-chief of Elle. I've got author Dean Atta coming up. I've interviewed influencer Nicole Okran. Some really, really incredible people. And yeah, I come away from every newsletter, it gives as much to me as it gives to other people. And I've got about 500 subscribers and some really incredible praise from people saying, you know, that this reflects me. This is what I thought I was alone, but actually there's other people that feel like that. So I've been running mine since September 2020, and it's been an absolute joy so far.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really glad you're getting a lot out of it and enjoying it. And like I definitely love your newsletter, and I really love the Selling Sunset interview, and I definitely recommend you guys subscribe to it, of course. And yeah, Jenny, back to you. So kind of like obviously your newsletter talks a lot about sort of like freelance feels, and sort of like, very catchy name, and just sort of like the ups and downs of freelancing. And I was wondering like so what kind of made you want to kind of raise awareness of this side of freelancing? Because obviously, especially now the pandemic, so many people are going into it, so like definitely a gap for it, but like what made you sort of identify that gap, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I was just I was at quite a low point with my freelancing, but I knew I didn't want to go back into a staff job, because I'd had staff jobs and always freelanced on the side. So I always say it's a bit like I've been dating freelancing on and off for many years, and I was like, no, I want to commit to this relationship, but I wasn't happy. And my default often is to write about something. So it began as a blog, really, and then I started a little Instagram account, and people started to notice it. So I was like, oh, maybe there is something in this. And I always knew if it did build up, I liked the idea of starting a podcast. So a podcast came first. And then the more I saw newsletters coming up, and I imagine everyone's a bit like this, where you sort of, newsletters sort of gathered pace, and you start thinking, what are these newsletters? Oh, and I know some people have been writing newsletters for years. So there'll be people doing them who are like, they're not new, whatever. But then there's other people who are like, ooh, what are these? And I was one of those people, and I thought, So it was partly, if I'm honest, I kind of want on this bandwagon, but also, wow, what a great outlet for things I want to write that might not necessarily be commissioned, or might not be something I want to pitch out. It's like, oh God, this is all for me. So it kind of was a really lovely outlet for connecting with people, because people had started to say to me on Instagram in particular, thank you for being honest about things, it really helps. So I thought, well, I'll start a newsletter and see if that resonates with more people. And it kind of went from there, really. But yeah, I guess it was an extension of a mixture of blog and podcast feels that then led to thinking, yeah, I want in on that newsletter stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like for you, Rachel, must have been quite a similar thing, like just being open about maybe like sort of like the downs of freelancing, because obviously you see so much on social media, dream commission, personal news clacks, and nobody really talks about kind of the more sort of awkward stuff and ups and downs. So I was just kind of wondering, as well as like just a little bit about your newsletter beat, why do you think it's important to like sort of raise awareness of like failures in freelancing? I think you're on mute, mate.
Yeah, I told myself before this I wasn't going to do that, and then immediately did it. It's exactly that. It's a social media thing. I was feeling really down about my own freelancing after losing 2 major clients, and then going on Twitter, and it was personal news collections left, right, and centre, people getting commissions. And I thought, like, I can't be the only person who is not constantly having good news happen to them. And I thought it always makes me feel better to write about things and to share it. So I just thought I would do it, and then within the first week I got like 75 people subscribed. So it was like really, it kind of took off a lot quicker than I expected, much quicker than anything I'd done in the past. I got like several hundred readers on my first post, and it just instantly resonated with people, and I think it was a sign that other people, you know, wanted to hear the same kind of things, I think. And also just like not to make such a big deal out of it as well. Like, yes, you can mess up as a freelancer and things aren't always going great, but it doesn't have to be like a huge learning moment where you change your whole career from that moment on. It's like, no, sometimes a mistake is just a mistake, and it's kind of funny. And like, I look back at some of the things I did when I first started out, and I'm like, that was so stupid. Why on earth would I do that? That's funny. You know, it doesn't have to be that deep, essentially. So that's the kind of things I like sharing about the most.
Yeah, definitely. And like obviously, Izzy, your newsletter talks about sort of like identity anxiety and sort of like the mixed race experience, and obviously like it works to educate people as well as kind of just like bringing general awareness to the issue. And I was just wondering, like, how do you, well, just kind of like I'm trying to think the best way to phrase this, but kind of like, do you think, how do you think maybe you've changed since starting the newsletter, like sort of like your writing and like your mindset? Do you think it, like, how has it changed? I'm just interested to hear about that. So
yeah, it has actually been really interesting, because, you know, like I say, I get so much out of this newsletter, and every conversation I have, so I have about an hour-long interview usually with the person that features in the newsletter, and I ask them, I have a kind of a set series of questions that I do my research on that person, you know, can elaborate, add more in, develop those questions. And I go in thinking one way about mixed identity, and oh, we all feel this, and no one feels like that. And actually, when I listen to their stories, they disagree with me. And I love it when they disagree with me, because it pushes me to, as much as I'm saying I want to break down this idea of mixed people being this monolith, I still have that in my mind. And I like it when people challenge me on that. And I, as a journalist and as someone who interviews a lot, when I'm speaking to someone and asking questions, I always have in the back of my mind the answer that I want to get from them, or, you know, the kind of discussion that I'd like to prompt. And sometimes my guests don't give that to me. And I have to think about, well, why am I pushing for it? So the first question I ask everyone is, how do you define your ethnicity? You know, do you call yourself half black, half white? Do you call yourself biracial? Do you just say mixed? Do you not specify? And at the start of doing the newsletter, I would kind of keep pushing. If they just said, I'm mixed, I would kind of say, okay, so your mum, you know, your dad, where, you know, what, who's got what? And actually, I need to stop doing that, because the whole point of what I'm trying to say is, if someone wants to identify as mixed and that's it, that's totally fine. They don't have to break down the maths for anyone else, only if they want to. So it's made me think about why I want certain answers and what I'm aiming to get from them. And I think it's made me listen a lot more, and just be, I think as a journalist, you have to be curious anyway, but to pick up on what people are saying and pull that out. And maybe that's something that I've never thought about before. And it might even be something that I disagree with, but I need to remember that my aim is to put it all out there. It's not up to me to gatekeep what mixed identity is. So it's changed a lot. It's been very interesting.
oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. So now on to sort of more kind of like the practical side of starting a newsletter, because I know there's definitely a lot of people here who be looking to starting their own. And just how do you got, because I know like some of you guys mentioned you got a lot of interest and good feedback in your newsletters. How did you get people to subscribe? How did you get your message out there and appeal to masses, basically? And so if we hear from Jenny first, please.
Good question. I think the main place I publicise it and I get people signing up from is social media. Talking about it a lot on Instagram and Twitter, and sharing the link, posting on LinkedIn as well. I think people often forget LinkedIn, but actually sharing your newsletter on LinkedIn and using the right hashtags can get it into some good niche groups. So say you were writing, anyone listening wants to start one about journalism in some way, or copywriting, for example, there are groups on LinkedIn and Facebook where you can share. I think I've had it mentioned in a couple of other places as well. So if you've got the right people in your network, or you might be able to connect with people and get them to mention your newsletter in their newsletter. That's a bit of a kind of thing where you might like to ask people. And if I'm ever a guest on a podcast, for example, I'll always make sure to mention it. I mention it on my own podcast, so I remind podcast listeners that the newsletter's there. It's funny though, and I don't know if the other two ladies have this, but every so often someone will subscribe and you'll be like, oh, like the other day I had 3 subscribers from Australia. So then I'll start to think, well, how's that? Has someone mentioned this on a news site or something, or somebody mentioned this out in Australia? Why have 3 people in Australia suddenly decided to sign up? So then you start searching for how they've come to you, kind of thing, because you're like, well, hold on, what is there more to be explored there? So sometimes there's a few fun curveballs and you're like, I don't know why that person, how they found it, you'll never know, but they've just obviously seen it somewhere, or it's popped up on a search for them, or so sometimes there's a bit of those ones. But yeah, social is a big place to promote and get it signed up to, I'd say, definitely.
And how about you, Rachel?
Yeah, the same really, like social media. And then I guess it helped that because mine's kind of based around freelancing in general, but sort of more specifically journalism, I just sent it out to people I knew. Like I emailed a whole bunch of people who I had contact with, and I just said like, hey, I'm starting this, you might be interested, to people who I thought might genuinely be interested. And it went from there. It always helps when other people share posts as well. Whenever I've written something that's really resonated with someone else and they've shared it, that always, spikes a flurry of signups. And I do get the random ones as well, like you were saying, Jenny. Like I think I got like 10 new subscribers from America recently, and I was like, what? I don't know where they came from. But yeah, it's always nice to see. Welcome people to the community, I guess. Yeah, and then I guess as well, just talking about it as much as possible. I feel like I get quite annoying on Twitter because I'll tweet as I'm writing it, saying that it's going to be up soon. I'll give like little snapshots of upcoming stories, and then I'll tweet an hour before it goes out. And so for people who know when it's going out and are prepared and are signed up already, it must be quite annoying, but it does always help to kind of put it out there and be in front of people as much as possible.
Yeah, and Isabel?
Well, I'm literally making notes as I'm in this talk. I'm never too old or established or anything to learn from peers and seniors. So I'm taking as much from this talk as I hope the audience are as well. So for me, again, it was similar. I feel like this is about to be a long answer, but a couple of things. Well, a couple of things that were in my strategy were I thought about the connections. So mine is interview based. So I thought about the connections and who I knew who could possibly kick off the newsletter. And I do my interviews in batches. So it's a weekly newsletter. It's a lot to keep up with, but I kind of interview loads of people and I have those transcripts ready to go. So I had interviewed a lot of people whose stories are just as worthy, just as incredible and just as important. But in order to kind of capture that outside attention, I kicked off with Farah Store, who I know from working at Elle in my job at Hearst. And she obviously has quite a big profile within certain, subsets of the industry. So kicked off with her to kind of get eyeballs on it. She very kindly posted about it on her Instagram as well, which she did not have to do. So forever grateful to her for that. Again, I post on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. I joined quite a few Facebook groups that are about mixed race identity. And I post it in there. I posted the launch in there, and then I post in there whenever I think there's a particularly strong newsletter, or maybe someone else is a member of that group, like Natalie Morris, who's written a book called Mixed Other. So I knew that she was in that group, so I posted about it saying, here's one of our very own in the newsletter. I also, again, kind of getting other people to share it. And yes, that could be asking them, but also I can't remember if it was Jenny or Rachael who just said as well, if you are building those networks and your work is authentic, people who are kind of in the same space as you are gonna want to share it. So I got shared by Everyday Racism, which was amazing. It's run by two mixed race sisters who have a book out on mixed identity soon. You should read that. But that was a surprise to me, and I got loads of new Instagram followers from that. I also think about, so my newsletter can come up with quotes. I know, people like seeing brightly coloured quotes on Instagram. I make sure that I create those quotes once a week and share them to my stories, have the handle at the bottom of the image. I also put those on Pinterest with a backlink to my newsletter. So if anyone is finding those quotes on Pinterest, they can come back to me. It is just about putting yourself out there. Don't be afraid to shout about yourself. As Rachael was saying, don't be afraid to just go out and tell everyone what you're doing, because social media is a feed, right? No one's going to get annoyed at you unless they only follow you, and that's the only thing that you post about. So just keep posting. And friends and family as well, if they can give you shout outs. You never know where you're going to find a new subscriber. yeah, this is my kind of long rambling answer, but I feel like there are so many different ways. But yeah, be strategic about it. If you can create a visual, you know, get those visuals out there as well, get those shared. Canva is a great online resource where you can create great Instagram templates and stuff for free. But basically just big yourself up. No one's going to big yourself up as much as you are going to. So just got to go for it and enter Rachel's awards, of course.
Yeah, and so we've had like not so much a question, but sort of like a interesting point someone's raised is like because like in journalism, like little journalism students, like myself included, we're taught that we aren't the story and like it's not really about us. But then like the newsletter has kind of flipped that concept on its head, and so they were sort of wondering like just sort of like how the industry sort of got to a point where people are sort of starting things like newsletters, if that makes sense. So yeah, Jenny.
That fascinates me. I read it several times because I didn't know that. I mean, I imagine when you're told you're not supposed to be the story, does everyone not turn around and go, well, hold on a minute, that's not what I see? Like opinion journalism is huge. So I'm surprised. I guess that's probably more relating perhaps to news journalism, maybe. But I mean, often you're the story. And I'd say the flip of that is there are many, many newsletters where the writer isn't the story or the writer isn't the person. I mean, Isabella's is a classic example. Yes, she's writing it and interviewing, but each week she's completely not the story. She's interviewing somebody else. So a newsletter doesn't have to be you going, dear diary, oh, this week I've done this. The amount of those newsletters that I've unsubscribed to, and a lot of coaches have those newsletters, I'm finding in my new community that I've joined with the coaching, because they're like, hey guys, this is what I did this week, and do you want to sign up to my coaching program? And it's like, stop selling to me every time you send your newsletter. So there's that whole, you know, the people that only write about themselves, and especially when they haven't publicized it as that, a lot of people will just unsubscribe to those. So I definitely say there's a balance that could be found there. And also that idea, I mean, there's some, if people don't sign up to it, there's one called Freelance Writing Jobs by a lady called Sian Meads Williams. Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? It's really worth subscribing to. And she rounds up loads of job opportunities. She has some exclusive job opportunities. She often, you know, she works with different sort of job boards people, and they send her things that will only go in her newsletter, which is a good example of then driving revenue, which is something I think we'll probably talk about in a bit. So hers is like a jobs newsletter. It's not a long read at all. And another one I'd mention is called The Single Supplement by a lady called Nicola Slawson. And it's all about sort of single life. And she often gets a guest writer to do hers for her. So sometimes she'll have somebody else, her one today was somebody else writing it. So yeah, it doesn't have to be, it's not a dear diary, this is what I did on my holidays every week newsletter. I think newsletters are way more varied than that. And you could be a reporter and still do a newsletter on your niche, on your life as a reporter, but interview different people in your sphere of sort of contact. There's loads of scope. Yeah, definitely. Does that help? Did that help answer the question?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks. Oh, good. Thanks for asking the question.
And Rachel and Isabella, Rachel and Izzy, do you have anything to sort of add to that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I also think there's like a distinction between like a business focused newsletter, like how you were saying, Jenny, like a company will have a newsletter, but that's more like a mailing list where they'll send out something and it's very branded and it will say like, you know, we've got this at offer, and that all goes out. That's very much like a marketing newsletter where it has to be about the brand. And that's fine. Like obviously that kind of newsletter is a type of newsletter and that's fine, but a journalistic newsletter isn't necessarily about that. So I'll regularly interview experts for my newsletter because sometimes I don't know, I know what it's like to be a freelancer, but I don't know, I wrote one about like the psychology of failing and what's actually going on in our heads and the panic response and all this kind of thing. So I interviewed a psychologist because obviously I don't know that. And I approach it just like I would if I was writing a feature about that. And Izzy, I'm sure has more to say on this with the whole interviewing thing, but you know, it definitely doesn't have to just be about you. And also like I think all of our newsletters don't have like our names in the title. Both of you guys have like separate social media handles for the newsletter. I don't, but you know, it's a completely separate thing and it exists in its own right. Like you could feasibly like sell it on to someone else and it would still keep going. So I think it's definitely separate from the person in that way. And yeah, it's just like writing for me, it's just like writing another feature every week. With outside voices included as well.
And something I would say, and it's, I hope this comes across in the right way, but it's also a smart career decision and a smart business decision. So I am very passionate about debunking this kind of mixed myth that, you know, it's one type of person. You know, when girls on Love Island are like, my type is mixed race guys, I'm always like, just say what you mean. Like, you like a light-skinned black guy that your racist family will accept. Like, I'm very passionate about that. But also, it was a smart career decision for me, because let's be completely honest, my company announced on Thursday that they're cutting 20% of our staff. I don't know if I have a job in a couple of months. The journalism industry is very difficult. And even if you do get a staff job, you're not necessarily going to be able to write just the pieces that you want to write about. If it was down to me, I'd only write about lifting up marginalized voices and people from, you know, working class or disabled or LGBTQ backgrounds. That's what I'm all about. But I can't do that. I have to do roundups of hyaluronic acid serums. That's great. They serve a purpose, but it's not what I'm passionate about. So always having something that sets you apart is a smart career decision, because jobs aren't guaranteed. And I don't mean to say that as a scary thing. I just think you always need to be looking out. Never, this again, I hope this is coming across in the right way, but don't kind of settle comfortable. Yeah, just think about what sets you apart in this industry that is so competitive. What can you do that's going to make you stand out? And that hope, you know, I hope kind of answers why would you start one? Because yes, it's as much a service to your audience, and you know, it can be something that you're passionate about and a real passion project, but also it's a smart decision, and it's okay to make smart decisions.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. That's I'm actually learning so much from this. Sorry. Yeah, thank you so much. And we've got another sort of practical question now. One student said their publication is considering starting like an alumni newsletter and using it as like a source of revenue through donations. And like they were just wondering, like, do you think that's like as people who, you know, are doing a newsletter, like, is that viable? Like, is that something you would advise? And yeah, just be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Jenny? Oh, no, mate. No, sorry, okay, carry on.
I was just going to say, so I didn't know if the other two newsletters use Ko-fi or Ko-fi or coffee. It's basically spelled Ko-fi. And that is something where people can buy you a coffee. So, you know, some people can sometimes feel awkward about giving you £3 or like £5 or, you know, making a donation to something. But if you say you're buying me a coffee, it feels a bit more comfortable. So that's something that I use. And I added it onto my newsletter at the suggestion of a journalist friend, actually. She said, you know, you're doing this, but I think you'd feel like maybe it could become more of a career, and, you know, you could go freelance full time if you added it on. And I set a goal of £75 to pay for Otter, which is a transcription service. Incredible service. Everyone, please use it. If they do free ones, like free amount each month, but with a weekly newsletter, I pay the £75, and that was my goal amount. And I've met that goal in, I'd say, less than 6 months, which I never thought anyone would give me a penny. But I got it from friends, family, and people who I don't know, people who just said, I love the work that you're doing. So I just wanted to, just say that it could be an option. You might get more than you think, but maybe if you are, mine is kind of secondary. Mine's like, read the newsletter. If you like it, then maybe give me a tip. And I've also just set up my Twitter tip jar, which is a new thing on Twitter. And you can now give people tips on Twitter. But yeah, now I'll let Jenny and Rachel kind of talk more, because I'm sure they have more experience with that than I do.
No, I agree. Coffee is a great thing, because you'd be surprised the amount of people that are like, oh yeah, I'll buy you a coffee. And sometimes they pay you a tenner, way more than a coffee. You're like, woo! Sometimes they don't at all. But I would probably say that if you're thinking about, so your alumni are quite a niche group. So if you're thinking about getting donations from them, my experience of being asked for alumni donations is a cold call from students sort of ringing me up saying, hello, you went to my uni once upon a time. I graduated in 1999, everybody. That's how once upon a time I went to university. But I still did. I was a student, etc. And I get calls sometimes saying, would you like to donate as an alumni? And I like the idea of a newsletter doing that, because it takes away that eek of a cold call. But at the same time, if that's all you're going to ask for every time, that for me would start to become a bit like, oh, here's that newsletter that's always asking me to give some money. So I think you'd probably have to think about your content really strongly, to think about something that would really entertain and engage people. And then you'd mention the donations as a sort of thing at the bottom. You'd say, you know, if you've enjoyed this newsletter and you're an alumni and you're considering donating, but you'd have to really kind of put the hard sell down the bottom, because otherwise people are going to get turned off. And I think you'd have to think really strongly about the content in order to keep people engaged month by month by month, if you were going for monthly. So yeah, but I mean, it's worth exploring. Maybe subscribe to some similar ones. And I'd say that about any newsletter. If you're thinking, oh, I'm thinking of starting a newsletter in this niche, read or subscribe to the ones in the same area and see how they're doing it, and see what they do, and see if you like it, or whether that would work for the thing you're thinking of starting. See what other unis are doing, and whether they're doing it whether it seems to be working. Have a little look around.
Yeah, like looking at competitors is definitely, for any business, like a really good idea. And yeah, especially for student media, like I reckon like connecting with alumni is definitely a good idea. Like when I was editor of West Scene, we were crowdfunding for something, and getting in touch with alumni who were involved definitely helped. So yeah, I'm not as clever as these people. So Rachel, if you could give me your point of view on that and whether it's viable, that would be awesome.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I also use coffee, and it's great. So 3 for 3 for coffee, I guess. And yeah, donations are definitely a viable way of getting income, but I would echo what I think the others have said and say it's not necessarily reliable. You might get a surprise and you get loads all in one day, maybe when you've done a particularly good post, I don't know. But then it might go dry for the next like few weeks, you never know. So you can also, like, especially through Substack, you can do like paid versions where you have to pay for like certain posts and all this kind of thing, which might be something you want to consider. But I'd echo what Jenny said, it has to sort of have the content value there as well, because people are very used to getting newsletters for free. So you would have to have something in there to make people want to pay for that access. And similar for donations, like give people something that they are going to say, oh, that's really valuable to me, so I'm going to drop £3 in. I often make a joke at the end of my newsletters about why you should give a donation. Sometimes they're quite lighthearted, they're, you know, like, pay me for the emotional trauma of recounting that horrible, embarrassing fail, or whatever it might be. Other times it's a little bit more serious. I'm like, oh, that person who wrote this story was really great, so I'd love to buy them a coffee, kind of thing. So whenever you can show your readers where that money is going to go and like be specific about it, like Izzy as well with Otter. I mean, if she said up front, like, that's what I want to do, that's what I'm spending on this newsletter, and I'd love to pay that back. So people have been like, yeah, she should have that money paid back. Like when they can see where the money is going to go, I think that will all help as well.
Amazing, thank you so much. And just kind of following on from sort of like money matters, like I'd like to know a little bit more about how you guys sort of monetize your newsletters and kind of make money off it. And like obviously Substack is a really great platform. It'd be great to sort of know a little bit more about that, because as Izzy pointed out, like she was able to meet her Otter goal through that, and like just knowing a little bit more about practically how to make money through a newsletter would probably be really interesting to know, I think. So Jenny?
I think one of the best ways is to not look to your subscribers for their money, because I think Rachel's completely right. People sign up for free. I think there's a danger if you start a free newsletter, and then I've seen this with quite a few where people have gone, oh, this newsletter takes me ages, so I'm going to start charging you. And they'll say to people, it's taking me a long time to do my newsletter, it's a lot of effort, so I'm going to start charging you because I need to be paid for my time. And as a subscriber, you probably think, well, hold on a minute, you started it. Like, why do I still have to pay you? Did you not realize how long it was going to take? So there's a slight sort of push and pull there. So I would say look to external sources rather than your subscribers. Don't suddenly turn to them as the first port of call and say, right, I'm going to charge you all. So there's obviously, if it's something like the Jobs Roundup newsletter that I mentioned, she has sometimes a sponsor. So sponsor's probably your top one. And then obviously people might do an exclusive mention or something. So say you're doing a roundup, like the jobs newsletter is a really good example because it's such a good newsletter. So she might have an exclusive job that nobody is posting elsewhere, and they will pay her to put that on her newsletter because she can reach a certain number of subscribers for them. So she's developed that niche first. The other thing you can do, which I know someone started doing, is she calls it her classifieds. So she's got over 5,000 subscribers, and she has at the bottom, you can put things in there. So for example, if I wanted to tell her readers about something I was running, one of my coaching courses, she won't just mention it in there, but I could pay her to go in her classified section. So there are a few sort of little ideas apart from asking your subscribers. Another thing some people do, which I think Rachel just mentioned, is a spin-off. So you might have your newsletter, but then people who pay might get an interview with somebody that you don't provide on the normal newsletter, or they might get sort of something extra from you that's worth them then. So you could always set that up afterwards to sort of once you've lured people in initially, then set something else up that's then worth, which you get on lots of websites and stuff as well, don't you? Like the members area, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Rachel, have you got any more tips?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo everything that Jenny just said, and then just add like my main source of income, like how I fund my newsletter, which, by the way, I don't make a whole lot of money about my newsletters from my newsletter. I mean, so I think it does take time to build up enough of an audience where you can make a reliable source of income. So that's just something to be aware of, like, especially because when I started off, I didn't have a huge social media following and it wasn't really connected to anything else. So if you're really starting from scratch, like I was, it does take time to sort of get to a place where you can like make reliable income from it. But one way that I am doing it is that I have a pitch tracking spreadsheet, which is something else that I talk about endlessly on Twitter. But I link to that in every newsletter. It's related to kind of the niche of freelance journalism, and it's pay what you can. And there's my Ko-fi link just in there, so people can make a copy of the spreadsheet and then they donate whatever they think it's worth. So that's kind of a way I make money from the newsletter audience, I guess. It's the same kind of thing as having like a membership area. I have a product that those people might be interested in, and some like to pay for it. So you can offer, I mean, you could offer anything, you know, courses, ebooks, guides, whatever you want. For me, it was a spreadsheet, but the world is your oyster, really.
And Izzy, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have much to add aside from what everyone else has already said. So like I mentioned, my coffee, I still don't know how to pronounce it. I'm now not out of pocket. So I paid that £75 for my transcription software. I'm now not out of pocket for that. So I have broken even, if you will. But another thing, apart from kind of the paid Substack newsletters, the tip jar on Twitter, those kind of things, another thing I've seen people do, which is similar, is I listen to a podcast called the Mixed Up Podcast with Nicole Ochran and Emma Slade Edmondson, which is a fantastic podcast about mixed identity. They have a Patreon, so it's similar to this kind of extra content idea. You can pay a monthly fee and you'll get maybe extra content that they didn't put in the podcast. You get access to that. You also get access to a Discord server. So I need to explore this properly because I'm a Patreon of theirs and I haven't explored it properly, but it's an audio platform. And again, kind of that gives you something extra from just their main newsletter, main podcast, and you get to be a part of shaping that. You get to feedback what you think they should put into the, I keep wanting to say newsletter because we hear about newsletters, but put into the podcast. But yeah, I'm not at the point of monetization yet. I would like to be one day. So I just echo everything Jenny and Rachel have said and have made more notes. So.
I'd also say that like you can, I'm a bit of a fan of like the fact that something can buy you something that isn't necessarily financial revenue. So when you said earlier, Isabella, about the idea that, and I'm sorry to hear about your company, I really, you know, that was a bit of a, yeah, but the idea that you said, oh, I might use my newsletter if I go freelance, you're obviously building yourself as a voice in the mixed race and identity community. So you might then get asked to go on the radio, or you might get asked to write a piece for a magazine because they've seen your newsletter. So it can build you that credibility. And if you're the kind of journalist that's thinking, I want to write a book one day, editors and agents will look for what your presence is and what you've got to say about the subject. And if you've got a newsletter that you can say, well, here's a link to my newsletter, this is what I've got to say about the subject. It's sort of like an online portfolio that you're building yourself. So there's a lot of things it can bring to your career that aren't necessarily, I didn't start my newsletter thinking, I wonder if I'll make any money. And I don't care if I never make any money from it, because one of my goals with it is that if I did pitch a book to an agent, I could say, look at my newsletter, this is an evidence of the reach of the business and all of that kind of thing. So think about what it could bring for your career as well as what it might put in your pocket, I guess.
Yeah, and that's actually a nail on the head why I started Mixed Messages as a newsletter. So I was debating whether I launched it as a podcast, whether I launched it as a series of Instagram lives, a social media platform. And I knew that I wanted to write a book. And my mentor, who is Daisy Buchanan, another amazing author, she said to me, why don't you do it as a newsletter? Because it does serve as this proof for, editors, literary agents and all that kind of stuff. It serves as proof that you can write in this long form style. So again, it's about those smart business decisions, and it's just to kind of diverge into books slightly as well. This is the point I'm at in my career now. My company's not very stable. I've been looking at going freelance for a little while. I have a book proposal nearly done and ready to go about mixed race identity. But in the last few weeks even, the sisters from Everyday Racism, they've released their book. Nicole and Emma from Mixed Up Podcast, they're releasing theirs. Natalie Morris's book, Mixed Other, incredible. Georgina Lawton's Raceless, amazing. Dr. Remy Adekoya's Biracial Britain, amazing. So all of these books are coming out. And I've had to pivot my strategy now, because I need to look at a book that I'm still passionate about, but can come out quicker. So I'm looking at a different format of book, and that's what I mean about being smart. Like it's okay if you make a decision to build up your brand, build up your profile, get what you need to get from it, and then do the real passion project later. Because it's a wild, wild world right now. So make those smart decisions.
Well, that seems like a really good place to kind of wrap up everything. So before we get on to that, is there how can people get in touch with you? We've popped our links in the chat, but if there's anything we want to sort of tell our audiences about, now's the time. So Jenny?
Just to say thanks to everybody. I loved the questions. It's really got me thinking about my own newsletter and what I put in it. So that's been really it's been a little internal brainstorm for me. I would probably add, I'll put the details of it obviously in the chat. I would add that Freelance Feels is a podcast available on most platforms, where I interview different freelance people about their life, their ups and downs, their challenges, and they give loads of advice as well. So if you like your pods, Freelance Feels is also a podcast.
Amazing. And Rachel?
Pleasure to be here. So having me. I'm on every social media, I think, as Rach Davis Act, so ETC on the end. And anyone who has a newsletter is more than welcome to go over and follow the newsletter awards as well, which categories should be announced within the next few weeks. So we're hoping to have that this year, and I'd love to see as many people from here involved as possible. I'll drop the links in the chat as well.
Amazing. And Izzy?
You can follow me at Izzy MKS, which I'm on Twitter, Instagram, pretty much everything as. And then Instagram is Mixed Messages Newsletter, and Twitter is Mixed Messages Letter, which I've put in the chat box as well. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to add as well, just always connect with different people and network. Even this talk today, I'm so glad that I've been able to speak with you three women as well. So yeah, if you're thinking of launching one, do get in touch. Follow me and then DM me saying, I'm thinking of starting one, just to let me know that you came from this talk as well. I'm more than happy to always chat to people and offer advice wherever I can. But thank you for asking me to speak today.
That's really kind of you. Yeah, and thanks so much for you guys giving up your time, and for the audience, thanks for coming. And just to let you guys know, we have got a couple of events coming up. So at fall, you can talk about getting into and succeeding in journalism. or you could drop in to see a couple of designers at our design drop-in. And then at 7 o'clock, streaming on YouTube, is our SPA Awards. So if you're nominated or know anybody who is, definitely tune into that. And thanks again so much, guys, for coming.
Thanks
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Happy Sunday.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye.